What's up guys, and in today's video I'm going to be talking to you about scaling through delegation, how I am actively using this as leverage, and how I am thinking about this in terms of mental models and frameworks, and what it is that I'm actively doing to build and scale through delegation. So without further ado, like always, the mission with these videos is to show how builds raw and real, to show you the good, the bad, the ugly, what it is that I'm actively implementing in terms of mental models and frameworks, how we're actively also just scaling those into the future, what we're learning, and also what we're failing at, just to be raw and authentic and show our builds, and also just to solve what hurts within businesses and organizations, to basically just come in and be the chief problem solvers and just build back-end infrastructure through that, and also just to call in visionaries, basically people that are aligned with our mission and what it is that we're actively solving for, and also just to build a network of cool people doing cool things at the same time. So without further ado, like always, I like to break this down into 5 steps of how I delegate to multiply output, which is super important, because in as much as I can do so many things by myself, I ultimately just do need a team to be able to scale the level of output that I will be having, and also just scaling in terms of the operations that we'll be doing back both on the front end and also on the back end. So number one being identify your zone of genius, which is super important. And why this matters is because your time belongs to the mission. I know that my time is super critical to the mission, to the overall vision and goals that we have. So just being able to make sure that I'm not micromanaging every task. So just saying that, hey, I need to focus on the points that create the most amount of leverage for the team and also for the business in the long term, and also just allows us to scale our value output and also just to output a lot more, because in as much as I can do so many things on a day-to-day basis, it is ultimately limited. And also just being aware of that, to say, hey, each and every single day the output that I have on a day-to-day basis is limited, and also just saying I need to make sure that I have a team around me that I ultimately trust to also just add to the level of output that I'm producing on a day-to-day basis, and also just people aligned with the mission, that it is what who is aligned with what it is that we're building on a day-to-day basis. And also saying, how am I actively doing this, which is I build systems and close deals. So my main goal is just to ultimately just build the systems, making sure that each and every single thing is going according to plan, and also just closing deals. And then my team handles code, design, and execution. So just making sure that, hey, I'm handing off, or I'm giving delegation or delegating to my team to make sure that they're running XYZ, but also making sure that, hey, even though they're running this, I need to make sure that I'm also just keeping in tabs of what is going on from a high level, to making sure that, hey, each and every single day, that although they may be doing XYZ, I'm not managing each task, and I'm not saying, hey, do XYZ each and every single time. Is that they do it, I tell them what to do, and I say, hey, we need to get XYZ, which is the overarching goal for this specific task, or what it is that we need to do. For example, I use my ODCAM framework, and if you don't know what that is, you can just click through the past videos. I've made a video covering that, and ultimately say, hey, they ultimately just understand what it is that they need to do. Then I just come in and make sure everything is refined and is on point, which ultimately allows me to scale my output and also just creates leverage. Because once I am focusing on the higher leverage tasks, I think it's pretty simple to say that it's also just allows me to do a lot more, and also just scale operations both on the back end, and making sure that we're getting things done on a day-to-day basis, not just tasks but also the system builds that we're doing each and every single day. And also just making sure that momentum is building within the team, that each and every single day I am building the momentum for our team, and making sure that each and every task ultimately is done, and is done to the highest degree. And then saying, hey, I make sure that I have daily moves that I make each and every single day, which is listing 3 things only I can do, making sure that, hey, I list 3 things that only I can do, and then delegating one of those things today. Not saying, hey, let me delegate or let me do all these 3 things, just understanding what is the highest leverage. And I think for building operations and just scaling backend systems, I think this is super powerful. It's a powerful tool to have, to say, hey, each and every single day, I need to make sure that I'm focusing on the highest leverage task on a day-to-day basis, and I'm just attacking each and every single day, because that is ultimately going to reach us closer to our goals. I know in the beginning, for me, if I'm being kind of honest with you, I used to just do everything. I used to say, hey, if I'm the person that needs to know the most amount, I need to make sure that I'm doing every single thing. But ultimately, that is a bottleneck, because, like I said in the previous video, you're only as fast as your constraints. So basically, based on your constraints, that's how fast you're moving. And if you solve those constraints, you move even faster. So ultimately, just understanding that, hey, I can only do so much in a single day, and I need to be super locked in, and ultimately just create leverage for myself and also for the team, just making sure that we're actively just hitting the nail in the wall and pushing forward each and every single day, which ultimately just comes down to asking the question, which is, what's your unique leverage? What leverage could you create today that is unique to you within the business, and that actually ultimately just moves the needle forward in what it is that you're doing today? Like always, I like to incorporate both personal and business principles into my daily lives, because I think it's just super powerful to have these tools in your daily life as well, to say, hey, you can not only just use this in business and this is solely business, but also you can intertwine them and also just have different principles that are uniquely aligned to you in your business and personal life, and then ultimately just keep on pushing the needle forward each and every single day. And then saying, hey, number two, which is hiring for complementary skills, meaning that each and everything that you do, you need to understand that, hey, you should not hire someone that does the same skill sets that you do. You should basically have someone that complements your skill stack. Say, hey, if you're good at coding, then get someone for design. It makes no sense to get someone else that's good at coding and then you just both doing the same thing, and then ultimately who's going to be doing design. I think also for business partnerships, this is super important to say each and every single day that we understand that the person that I'm working with, or the partner that I have in terms of working on projects and things like that, it has offers complementary skills and ultimately has a unique set of abilities that I don't have, because with those unique set of abilities, you're just able to push the needle a lot more and also just get a lot more things done, because you're working adjacent to each other and you're just moving in parallel and you're just doing two different things, but you're ultimately just pushing the needle forward each and every single day. And why this matters is you're not supposed to be good at everything. I think in the beginning, or at least for me in the beginning, I just wanted to be good at every single thing in every single aspect. But then the older I get, the more projects I do, the more I just get deep into this, and also just deep in the trenches as well, and just learning each and every single day, the more I realize that, hey, I don't need to be good at every single thing. It's okay that I'm good at one to two things, but those one to two things I know that I'm going to be excellent at. I want to be the top 1% at those one or two things that I'm uniquely good at, and then get someone else that is good at other things that I may not be 100% good at, because that's okay. Because ultimately, the number one thing you want to be doing is ultimately just creating leverage and pushing the needle forward each and every single day. And it makes no sense to constantly just do that if you think you're just good at every single thing. It's good to be a unique master at one to two things, and then have some other people that complement those skills, and then at least you just push the needle forward each and every single day. And saying, hey, find killers where you're weak, ultimately just having people that are killers where I lack the most, and ultimately saying, hey, even though I'm not the best at XYZ, I understand to a point that, hey, if this person was not there, I can get in there, I can jump in there straight away and get it fixed, and ultimately say, hey, I may not be the best, and that's okay, but at least I understand. Because for me, I like to say that, hey, even though I am, in the position that I am in, and making sure that, hey, I'm running the team and making sure everything is going smoothly, I always make sure that I'm the person with the highest amount of knowledge, making sure that I know every single moving part, because I think once you lose that tracking of knowing what's going on in every single part, you don't have to have a super in-depth knowledge, but you ultimately just have to know enough, because you're the person that's going to be the reference point for how these builds get shipped, how these builds get designed, and every single moving part. And I just want to strive to be the most knowledgeable person within the organization, to say, hey, I know how XYZ functions from a first principles basis, and I know how to solve problems if we need to solve them. So just ultimately just taking that point of view, slight tangent, but I thought it was super important to share, and saying, hey, how I'm doing it is my designers own Figma, my devs build fast, so ultimately just giving them the tools that they need need in order to just build because I trust them, and saying, hey, I focus on sales and product, just making sure that the product is up to point and that sales are happening, and that we'll ultimately just bringing in people that we can basically just create and solve problems for, and ultimately just pushing the needle forward each and every single day, and saying, hey, my daily move is hiring or collaborating with someone strong where I lack, just making sure that each and every single day I know that I know myself and I know where I'm best at, and I'm able to then say, hey, I need to make sure that I have XYZ person that complements my skill stack, and ultimately just allows us to push the needle forward each and every single day in what it is that we do in terms of operations, sales, and also just product as well, because you cannot always be the best at everything, but you can be uniquely good at one to two things, or maybe even three to four. Ultimately, just having that one thing to two things that you're super good at, and then scaling that up into the future. And then saying, hey, what is the key question I could ask here, which is, what's the critical skill you're missing right now? For me, just ultimately just asking each and every single day, I need to make sure that I have sales dialed in. I need to make sure that I have product super dialed in, and that also just team management skills and project management. I think that's a big one for me. Just ultimately just keep on understanding and learning new frameworks and tools and how to implement this, so that each and every single day we're building those daily actions that ultimately lead to us building momentum, that ultimately allows us to scale into the future, and also solve problems, bigger and bigger problems, and also just reach a new level of what it is that we're doing in terms of building out systems, and also just to create insane new levels of value, which ultimately comes to down to then having to set clear outcomes, not just tasks, to ultimately say, hey, each and every single day we need to have this overarching goal that we have, to making sure that, hey, micromanagement destroys momentum. Define what, not how. So basically saying, hey, we need to get XYZ done. We don't have to define how it needs to be done. Like, the result is the most important thing in my opinion, and only the clients only care about the result, and getting to the result is the only thing that matters. The how, not so much. Just making sure that, hey, XYZ, we need to make sure that we're getting to the result. For example, an analogy that I like to think about is, for example, when I was first starting out, I thought every single thing needed to be done custom, but most of the things that needed to be done can also just be done, just through templates that we have built once, and then just repeat it and repeat it and just use the same template, but ultimately just adjust certain things to ultimately fit the project scope as well, and just understanding that, hey, we need to make sure that I, for example, am defining to the team what needs to be done, not the how it needs to be done. I trust fully on them, but I'm also just going to come in to check and make sure every single thing is moving according to plan, and then saying, hey, how I'm doing this is, I told outreach 10 calls a week. They would figure out the rest, to make sure that, hey, everyone takes ownership of what it is that's going on. 10 calls a week, that's the goal, that's what it is. I'm not going to tell you how. I will give you instructions to say, hey, maybe XYZ, we need to check the pipelines, we need to do XYZ, but the how is where I just give full control and ownership, because once people have ownership, they ultimately know that, hey, this is down to me and this is my responsibility, and that ownership allows them to do a lot more than they would if they were being micromanaged. And I think micromanagement right now in this current phase of mine, I don't think is something that I'm super bullish on. I just want to make sure that, hey, the team understands that I trust them, I have the backing, and they also just are taking ownership of what it is that they're doing each and every single day, and then saying, hey, my daily move that I do each and every single day is assigning one clear outcome to my team by end of week, to say, hey, we need to get XYZ result by end of week. They figure out the rest, ultimately just giving them ownership, saying, hey, you just need to figure this out, and I trust you to figure it out, because we have all these mental models and frameworks. And that's why I think mental models and frameworks, and just being able to train the team to say, hey, this is how we solve problems, this is how we think through problems, and also ultimately just having that lifelong learning mindset ultimately just bridges that gap as well, and ultimately just allows them to figure out how and be creative with it. Because I think creativity in solving the how is also super important, but you also need to enable the team to be able to be creative in order to do that. And saying, hey, what is the key question I could ask here, which is, what's one result your team should own without you? Ultimately just asking, hey, if they need to close 10 deals, ultimately just say, hey, we need to make sure that they're closing 10 deals. I'd let them know, and then ultimately they take ownership, and then they're ultimately doing it for them, ultimately just creating that responsibility that ultimately empowers ownership, which jumps into the fourth point, which is empowering ownership. I've been hammering on this because it's super important, and why this matters specifically for ownership is people thrive when they feel trusted. Ultimately, when they understand that, hey, I'm fully trusted and this is all on me. If I mess up, it's on me because this is my responsibility. It ultimately means that, hey, the devs are leading sprints, outreach leads strategies, I guide, not micromanage. I'm making sure that I'm guiding them and just helping them to say, hey, each and every single day I'm here to help you. The hows, you just figure it out, but I'm going to tell you what needs to be done. And if you guys need any information or just assistance, then I'm always here to help, and also just to guide in every way that I possibly can help. And also just implementing better frameworks and mental models of how I think through things, make decisions, and ultimately just solve problems. I think that's super important. And ultimately just allowing them the freedom to take ownership and ultimately say, hey, this is all on me. I am building this each and every single day because I understand that this ownership or this responsibility is mine, and I'm going to just make sure that I do the best that I possibly can, which is another thing that if you assign ownership, they're also ultimately motivated to do the best that work that they can possibly do, because that is a reflection of them as well. And saying, hey, daily move is let one team member run your task with a task start to finish this week, ultimately just making sure that you're giving them the task from start to finish and just letting them figure it out and seeing how they cope. And if they don't do well, ultimately then you ask questions to say, hey, was it clear enough, was it measurable enough, and how did you implement different strategies, which is where my specific framework that I like to think through about things, the ODCAM framework, comes in handy, where I just make sure that, hey, we understand our decision making framework tool, that the tasks are clear, they're measurable, and their actionables are also just taken and measured as well, and making sure that they're also tracked. And ultimately just pushing the team to take ownership and be inspired to just understand the mission that it is what we're building for, and ultimately just to take that ownership to say, hey, we have this vision and I'm here to guide and ultimately just help you get there. But ultimately, if you need me, I'm always a knock away, but I'm always just going to be here to help 24/7, 365. And saying, hey, what is the key question I could ask you, which is, where are you blocking scale by holding too tight, ultimately just micromanaging, saying, hey, we need to get XYZ done, just give them the outcome, and then ultimately allow them and inspire them to take ownership, which ultimately allows them to do the best that they possibly can. At least that's what I found in my journey, just building a team. I think just ultimately just allowing them to better build by themselves and just taking that ownership ultimately allows them to scale their operations and to take a level of ownership that ultimately allows them to do the best possible work that they can possibly do. And then saying, hey, number 5, the final one that ties each and every single part together, which is building tight feedback loops. And this is super important to say why this matters is no feedback equals missed growth. I like to talk about feedback in almost every single video because that's how important it is. Just having those data points in terms of understanding that, hey, no feedback is bad feedback, and we can ultimately just learn from that feedback to ultimately say, hey, I need to make sure that I'm building systems in place. For example, the chaos feedback cycle that I have in terms of managing feedback, tracking feedback, and ultimately understanding where we need to improve in our product builds, and also what it is that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, because you just never know when that feedback might lead to a nugget that unlocks a new level of scale and also just a new level of understanding that allows you to build better products. And that's why I am always forever pro feedback, because feedback is the number one tool that ultimately just allows us to scale and just to continue building each and every single day. And saying, hey, tension handled fast equals scale, just making sure that each and every team member understands that, hey, if I'm lacking, then let me know. Just be open to letting me know that, hey, we need to make sure that we're on the ball on XYZ. And ultimately, if I understand that, and ultimately saying, hey, sure, like that's mine, that's on me, and taking accountability, and then ultimately allowing us to handle that and also scale faster, because like I always say, you move as fast as your constraints. So ultimately just allowing us to move a lot faster because we're moving and solving what is holding us back, and ultimately allowing us to scale our operations internally and just continue to just build cool things, honestly. And saying, hey, what I'm actively doing is Friday huddles, Slack threads, just ultimately saying, hey, on Fridays we huddle, we speak about things, we understand, hey, these are the feedbacks, this is where we can improve, but ultimately also just having data driven decisions as well is also super important to make sure that, hey, even though we have these feedback loops, we're incentivizing people or the team as well to ultimately also use data in order to build what it is that we're building, so that we're also just ultimately just making sure that we are taking decisions that ultimately yield the best possible result for us, while also using the data that comes in with the team as well, and saying, hey, here's what worked, here's what flopped, ultimately just understanding what works, what doesn't work, and ultimately understanding each and every moving cog in the wheel, and ultimately saying, hey, each and every single day we are moving the needle forward, but ultimately we need to understand, we need to build tighter feedback loops, we need to empower the team, also build ownership, and also just delegate as well, and also just make sure that we are showing the what, not the how, and ultimately saying, hey, what is the daily move that I do on a day-to-day basis, which is setting up one 15-minute call, 15-minute check-in, just to track wins, blockers, just understanding where the wins, where the blockers, and where do we actively just need to build and solve, because like I say, you are as fast as your constraint, you move as fast as your constraint, and ultimately solving that constraint allows you to move even faster at an optimal level and just keep on pushing the needle forward, and asking the key question, which is, how often do you review and refine your team? So ultimately just asking, hey, even though we're building stuff, even though we're doing XYZ, it's also important to get in touch with the team, making sure that we're just reviewing and understanding each and every single day that there's clarity, that we understand that, hey, each and every single day we understand that we need to make sure that we're just hitting the nail in the wall, and understand that each and every person needs to be happy within the team. We're not always going to be happy, but as long as we achieve our source of truth, which is ultimately just understanding that, hey, we're in it, also tying it with the vision that, hey, we're in it to ultimately inspire millions of people. We want to just also build $100 million worth of impact, and we also just, most importantly, also just want to reshape industries by also inspiring millions of people. And just solely understanding that, I know this feedback or scaling through delegation is ultimately just going to lead us to a new level of awareness and understanding, which is ultimately just going to allow us to scale to new heights. And I'm super excited to just continue just refining this process. I know that into the future, there may be some things that we get wrong, that I get wrong as well, and that's okay. But ultimately, the number one thing is building those feedback loops and just constantly just understanding where I can learn and do better. I think that's the most important thing. You can fail as many times, but how many times do you succeed, and how many times do you show up? I think that's super important. And each and every single day, I'm going to be dialing in this process and just making sure that I'm pushing the needle forward in as much as I possibly can, and also making sure that we're building right, we're scaling right, and building better products, because that is the most important thing, that we are constantly just refining our process and also just creating as much value as we possibly can. And I'm super excited to just continue to refine this in the trenches, like we always are. Like I always say, that we're in the trenches, but we're actively just figuring things out. And I'm super excited. Day 43 and so many more until we get to a day 100. So I'm super excited. And if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure to let me know in the comments, and also just make sure to check out, if you guys want to speak to me or just connect with me, make sure to check me out on LinkedIn, X, Instagram. Links are in the description, and I will see you guys in the next video.